Lai dynasty, sometimes known as the later Lai dynasty, was a Vietnamese dynasty that began in 1009 when Lý Thái Tổ overthrew the early La dynasty and ended in 1225, when the Queen Lý Chiêu Hoàng was forced to abdicate the throne in favor of her husband, Trần. During Lý Thái Tong's reign, the official name of Vietnam became Đại Việt. History. The Lai were of Chinese ethnicity. Phu Quien Province, Xinjiang Village was the origin of Lý Thái Tổ, the ancestor of the Lai dynasty ruling family. China, Phu Quien was the home of Lý Chiêu. The ethnic Chinese background of Lý Chiêu has been accepted by Vietnamese historian Trần Vuong. The Lai dynasty was started by Lý Chiêu. The Lai was the first Vietnamese dynasty that was able to hold on to power for more than several decades, allowing them to secure and expand the territory. While the Lai emperors were devout Buddhists, the influence of Confucianism from China was on the rise, with the opening of the first university in Vietnam in 1070 for selection of civil servants who are not from noble families. Politically, they created a system of administration based on the rule of law rather than on autocratic principles. The fact that they chose the Tila citadel as the capital showed that they held on to power due to economic strength and were liked by their subjects rather than by military means like prior dynasties. Lý Chiêu, a former temple orphan who had risen to commander of the palace guard, succeeded La Long Thin of the early La dynasty in 1009, thereby founding the Lai dynasty. He took the reign name Lý Thái Tổ. The early Lai emperors established a prosperous state with a stable monarchy at the head of a centralized administration. The name of the country was changed to Đại Việt in 1054 by Emperor Lý Thái Tổ. The first century of Lai rule was marked by warfare with China and the two Indianized kingdoms to the south, the Khmer Empire and Kampa. After these threats were dealt with successfully, the second century of Lai rule was relatively peaceful, enabling the Lai emperors to establish a Buddhist ruling tradition closely related to the other East Asian Buddhist kingdoms of that period. Buddhism became a kind of state religion as members of the royal family and the nobility made pilgrimages, supported the building of pagodas, sometimes even entered monastic life, and otherwise took an active part in Buddhist practices. Bonzes became a privileged landed class, exempt from taxes and military duty. At the same time, Buddhism, in an increasingly Vietnamized form associated with magic, spirits, and medicine, grew in popularity with the people. During the Lai dynasty, the Vietnamese began their long march to the south at the expense of the Chams. La Tai Han of the early La dynasty had sacked the Cham capital of Indrapura in 982, whereupon the Chams established a new capital at Vijaya. This was captured twice by the Lai army, however, and in 1079 the Chams were forced to cede to the Lai rulers the three northern provinces. Soon afterwards, Vietnamese peasants began moving into the untilled former Cham lands, turning them into rice fields and moving relentlessly southward, delta by delta, along the narrow coastal plain. The Lai emperors supported the improvement of Vietnam's agricultural system by constructing and repairing dikes and canals and by allowing soldiers to return to the villages to work for 6 months of each year. As the territory and population expanded, the Lai emperors looked to China as a model for organizing a strong, centrally administered state. Minor officials were chosen by examination for the first time in 1075, and a civil service training institute and an imperial academy were set up in 1076. In 1089 a fixed hierarchy of state officials was established, with 9 degrees of civil and military scala officials. Examinations for public office were made compulsory, and literary competitions were held to determine the grades of officials. In foreign relations with the Song dynasty during the Lý dynasty, Vietnam acted as a vassal state, although at its zenith it had sent troops into Chinese territory to fight the Song. In 1075, Zhuang Anshi, the prime minister, told the Song emperor that Viet was being destroyed by Campa, with less than 10,000 soldiers surviving, hence it would be a good occasion to annex Viet. The Song emperor mobilized troops and passed a decree to forbid all the provinces to trade with Viet. Upon hearing the news, the Lý ruler sent Lý Thuận Kiet and Tun Then with more than 100,000 troops to China to carry out a preemptive attack against the Song troops. In the ensuing 40-day battle near modern-day Nanning, the Viet troops were victorious, capturing the generals of 3 Song armies. In 1076, the Songs formed an alliance with Campa and the Khmer Empire and sent troops to invade Viet. Lý Nhan Tong again sent Lý Thuận Kiet, being one of the many great military strategists of Vietnam. Lý Thuận Kiet had placed spikes under the Nhuệ River before tricking the Song troops into the deadly trap, killing more than 1,000 Song soldiers and forcing the Song army to retreat. According to legend, during this time Lý Thuận Kiet had also composed the famous poem Nam Quc Sun Ha, which asserted the sovereignty of Vietnam over its land. This poem is considered the first Vietnamese declaration of independence. For 30 years the country was torn apart by war between various rival warlords. The devastating civil war ended with victory of the imperial force, led by Trn Thu Tho, the head of Trn clan. Some years later, the last sovereign of the dynasty, Empress Regnant Lý Chiêu Hoàng, receded the throne in favor of her consort, Trn Canh, one of the nephews of Trn Thu Tho. When the Lý dynasty was toppled in 1226, some royal members of the clan escaped to Korea and became generals of Goryeo dynasty. Phuket was the origin of the ethnic Chinese Tran who migrated to Vietnam along with a large amount of other Chinese during the Lý dynasty, where they served as officials. Distinctly Chinese last names are found in the Tran and Lý dynasty imperial exam records. Ethnic Chinese are recorded in Tran and Lý dynasty records of officials. Clothing, food, and language were all Chinese dominated in Van Don, where the Tran had moved to after leaving the home province of Phuket. The Chinese language could still be spoken by the Tran in Vietnam. The oceanside area of Vietnam was colonized by Chinese migrants from Phuket, which included the Tran among them, located to the capital's southeastern area. The Red River Delta was subjected to migration from Phuket, including the Tran, and Van Don port arose as a result of this interaction. Guangdong and Phuket Chinese moved to the Ha Long-located Van Don coastal port during Lý Anh Tong's rule in order to engage in commerce. The usurpation of the Lý occurred after they married with the fishing Fujianese Tran family. Socio-economic conditions. Administration in 1010, Lý Thái Tổ changed the 10 Dao subdivisions into 24 Lo. The Lo was possibly subdivided into Chao Phu. The Chao and Phu were further subdivided into Wen and Gip, and under them Hong and Pi. Civil service system. At the central level, under the king, were the Tai positions, Tam Tai for the three literary mandarins, and Tai Ui for the martial mandarin. Under the Tais were the Tu positions like Tu Su, Tu Bao, Tu Fo, and Tu Ui. Law. During the Lai dynasty, laws in Tai Viet were primarily based on royal proclamations, although a body of law composing of civil laws, criminal laws, litigation laws, and laws dealing with marriage existed. However, because the Lai rulers were devout Buddhists, the punishments during this era were not very severe. Economy. The pillar of Tai Viet economy in Lai era is agriculture. Technically, all farmland was in possession of the emperor. Each village allocated the farmland to households. Each household farmed their allocated land and paid annual tax, as well as provided mandatory labors and military services. To facilitate cultivation, Central Court built irrigation facilities and river levees. Buffalo and ox slaughtering was strictly prohibited since these cattle provided indispensable draft force in farming. Lai dynasty encouraged trade with foreign countries, primarily with the countries of Song China, Java, and Siam. Trade between Tai Viet and Song China in the border areas flourished. Private and government traders frequently visited Chinese trading ports in present Guangxi to exchange spices, ivory, and salt for silk. Lai dynasty founded the port of Van Thun in modern Quang Ninh province, a major trading port in Southeast Asia for hundreds of years. On the other hand, Lai court, particularly under Emperor Taitong's reign, tried to promote the consumption of domestic products. For reasons unknown, Emperor Caotong forbade the trade of salt and metal, gave rise to unrest and rebellions against the central court, which later led to the collapse of the Lai dynasty. Military. The dynasty continued to employ Ngu Bin Yu Nong, a system dated back to the Tang dynasty and Thin dynasty. Soldiers stayed in duty only several months per year. The rest of the year they returned to the home in peacetime. However, at home they were still required to train regularly with the captains and comrades, and during wartime they were not permitted to leave. Soldiers were not paid by the state, but they were exempted from tax and duty. This system allowed for a large trained standing army while the state was not burdened with maintaining it. Ngu Bin Yu Nong shares many common traits with Swedish allotment system. Foreign relations. Religion. The main religion of Tai Viet was Buddhism, however, they used elements of Confucianism, particularly in the civil service exams.